What's up, fellas? Good to see you guys back again for another episode of the Blind Pig, courtesy of BGObsession.com. Stop by the board, mix it up, jump on, have some conversations. Everybody on this podcast, as well as others, are more than happy to engage. We enjoy the banter back and forth until you tell us that Taylor Heineke is the best quarterback since Joe Theismann. Real quick, as we get started with some intros, top left is Paul. He hails as Canadian Hog. Bottom left is Chris. He hails as Chris. Bottom right is John. He hails as Boone. And I am Derek. You can find me at Silent Threat. Again, mix it up. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I think we're on all platforms, right?
Pretty much. We don't do TikTok.
No, I don't think that's ever going to happen. But we'll see, I guess. There's a first time for everything. Anyways, guys, we figured we'd get back together. Originally, we were going to do this on Monday, and things actually got a little bit too furious for us to do this Monday. Figured we'd delay it to Wednesday to react to some of the moves. So, Paul and I were talking a little bit before we started recording. This has been kind of a lot of activity with an underwhelming result, not necessarily in a bad way. Lots of moving pieces, lots of moving parts, but none of them really get you amped up. They all kind of say, okay, you go into it. I don't think we raised our ceiling, but I do think we brought our floor up quite a bit. It's about the best way I can say I'm going to react to it. I'm curious to see how you guys felt about the last 70-ish hours.
Well, I mentioned this. I started a thread kind of on this topic on the board. Last year we were screaming bloody murder, especially on offense, about there needed to be changes. And I don't know if they're the right changes or not, but no one can complain going into 2023 that we haven't made major changes. I mean, you got Bieniemy coming in. You've got I think the week started with Matsko getting let go, which I don't think that was a planned thing. I think that there must have been maybe a blow up of some kind. I think John Keim said it was philosophical differences, which to me means it probably got into
said it's my way or the highway.
Right. Or they just became clear that like they weren't on the same page. And so I feel bad for Matsko just because it's kind of late in the process for a coach to be looking for a new job, especially somebody as well regarded as he is. And it didn't sound like Bieniemy had like they had somebody in the pipeline that they were wanting to move in there. It sounded more like they just maybe got into it and decided to go their separate ways. And so we'll have to see what happens there. But anyway, and then we've had all the changes, decisions with guys being let go. Some fans like those releases and some don't, or non-signings. And then we've signed some guys, and of course we're going to talk about all that tonight. But I know, like in sharp contrast to the last couple of free agency periods, it was like cricket chirps for a week, right? I mean, like nothing happened. So fans were getting really anxious. This year, it's more just people arguing about what the additions and the releases have been. So it's a little bit different this year. I kind of prefer us being a little bit more active, even though we're still not as aggressive as I would like us to be. But anyway.
I think active is the key word. Starting with re-signing Duran right when that window opened when they could, and on through, it's been move after move after move after move. So, clearly they have a plan. I think the plan in the past was to sit back and let everyone else take who they want, and then kind of sift through who's left. Whether these guys are it or not, I don't know. It's no one makes you jump off a cliff in Glee, but they've got a plan and they're not wasting a lot of time. And I appreciate at least that part, that they're being proactive and moving.
Would you guys, before we get into specifics on some of the new players, what were you as surprised as I was that Payne re-signed with us and
very
came so quick?
I said it on this podcast last week. I said I don't see him signing an extension here. So I was on some level pleasantly surprised, because my biggest fear was we were going to tag him. We were going to roll with him through 23, and then we were going to let him walk.
Yep.
Ultimately, I guess this is the best case scenario, because you keep one of your own. We'll see how it plays out in the long run. Having allocated $40 million to your defensive line over the next 3 years. But
So I saw somebody on the board earlier, like right before I came on, posting that it would be nice if we had more players, core players that we re-signed for second and even third contracts. And I don't disagree with that at all. But when I read that, I thought, yeah, that's great, except that you're going to have to overpay those players almost every time, because that's the nature of free agency. Is players are looking for a big payday, that especially the second contract. And so if you want to keep players around for the long term, you almost have to overpay. And I do think we overpaid for Payne. But as we also saw on the board, he has had a pretty solid career so far. It's not like, I know we've even perpetuated the myth of like, well, he played great in his contract year, but prior to that, he was just kind of meh. But when you look at the numbers, that's really not accurate at all. He's been just below John Allen the whole way in terms of production. Maybe not as flashy as Allen, and maybe not the kind of vocal leader that Allen is, but he's been pretty damn good. I was surprised when someone, I don't know if it was Chris or somebody, put up the numbers. Yeah, and you can't look at those numbers and do anything other than give the guy props, because he really has been solid. So I appreciate you doing that, Chris.
Well, to your point about second and third contracts, in recent history, we haven't exactly been acquiring and drafting players that would have been worthy of second and third contracts.
That's true too.
We've just found ourselves in that position recently with guys like Terry McLaurin, John Allen, now Payne. We're looking at Curl, Derek Forrest. I mean, a lot of these guys we're talking about are still on their rookie deals. So we go back 5 to 10 years. 10 years ago is when you would have been drafting a guy that is coming up for his third contract. And I don't think any of us had a lot of confidence in our front office to make the right draft picks the year that Robert Griffin III was picked, which was 12, and Cousins. Hard to believe that was 11 years ago.
Don't overlook the fact that McLaurin and Payne and Allen and also Montez Sweat, who is now entering into discussion, I don't believe any of those were drafted by this current regime.
No,
correct.
They're resigning Jay Gruden's players.
Yeah, the big signing, the big signing that Rivera and company made was Chase Young, and that's guy's probably the most tenuous of all the stars as far as what's going to happen. Right? We don't even think they're going to give him the fifth year option. May not even be on the table. So
yeah, that's their marquee draft pick is Chase. Well, their big flashy draft pick, but looking later in the draft, they've done really well. I mean, like I was saying, Curl, late round guy. Forrest, late round guy.
Last year was a great draft. I thought a really good draft with Dotson, and who we're all like, who the hell's Dotson? Jahan Dotson. Well, we quickly found out who he is, right? I mean, and Robinson. I mean, there's been a lot of good recent picks. How much do you think John Allen had to do, if anything, with Payne re-signing? I just wonder if that wasn't a big influence, like, hey, let's keep the band together, man.
Well, it's funny that you say that, John, because when you think back to a couple of years ago, remember the two of them are fighting on the sideline in that Dallas game, and I remember at that time there's people like, this is the beginning of the end, like trade one of these guys type thing. I think it does play into it. I think that both of those players feed off of each other. I think there is some pride as well in potentially establishing the best defensive interior in the NFL. So, and the other thing is that those two guys have had a history together, I believe dating back to college as well. There's pride in being able to build something special with players that you appreciate and players that you work well with. So yeah, it certainly has to influence that decision. I think that any of us would certainly want to play with someone who's considered to be, a top 5 guy at their position. If I was a defensive tackle, I would love playing next to Jonathan Allen. So it absolutely has to factor into it.
It was mentioned on the board, I think, during the pre-Duran Payne re-signing that that Payne has benefited by playing next to Jonathan Allen, and I think he has. But I also wouldn't completely dismiss the fact that Jonathan Allen has benefited by playing next to Duran Payne.
Yeah.
I think there's a synergy. They know each other. They've been around each other for years. I think there's a comfort there. So I'm happy with it.
Yeah. So the other guys that we signed, what do you guys have any that really jumped out at you that you felt like were really good additions? Not that we're done yet. We may be done. It's hard to say, but.
So the one that stood out to me is probably the one that happened today, the Jacoby Brissett signing. And I'm not saying that from the standpoint that I think that this guy's going to come in there and light the world on fire and become our new starter. In fact, I don't want this guy to even see the field this year. I like it from the standpoint that we've brought in a veteran. We've brought in a guy that I believe has close to 50 starts in his NFL career with a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. And when you're considering, that what his role is to be a backup. That's not a terrible number to have in place as a backup quarterback. He seems to me as though he's a guy who knows his role. He's been in a lot of systems. He's worked with a lot of coaches. He's not going to come in and, step on anybody's toes, but if we need him in a pinch, he's going to be there. I think he's the right fit in the sense that he'll keep a guy like Sam Howell on alert, but at the same time, not necessarily threaten him to the point that he's going to take over his job. So I think it's just the right type of player to bring into the building. Again, knows his role, knows what he's there for. And I think it'll ultimately be a positive influence, hopefully, in the development of Sam Howell. So to me, that's been our best move of the free agency period right now, or to this point. I haven't been crazy with some of the offensive lineman acquisitions, but the Brissett one is one that stood out to me.
I'll double down. I'll double down with Paul. I like the Brissett move. I think that bringing in even semi-serious competition at the position will only sharpen Hal a little bit more. And as much as Taylor Heineke was loved and adored, and I personally love him as a guy, there's no chance in hell he was ever going to start for this team this coming year. So I don't know if that push in training camp through OTAs, etc., would be there for Hal like it will be with Brissett. Not that Brissett will win it, but I think he's more serious competition. The other selection I liked is Gates from the Giants, although I do have concerns about a guy that almost had his leg amputated a year and a half ago coming in especially. But I believe he's going to, I'll take my bold prediction right now. I believe he'll be the starting center game one. And I think he's a better center than he is a guard. But from all of the clips I saw, he's a tough son of a bitch. He doesn't back down from anyone. He gets in Aaron Donald's face. And at almost 90%, I would say, of Giants fan reaction was disappointment that he was leaving New York. And that's always a pretty good indicator of what kind of guy you're getting.
So he had a tib-fib fracture. So basically that whole lower leg snapped. And good news is it took him like 14 months to come back from that, because big bones like that take a long time to heal to where you can really, they're 100%. But the good news is once you've recovered from that, it's in some ways it's better than like an ACL or an MCL where, you just never know for sure what the impact of that's going to be. So I think he's probably in good. Shouldn't be a big concern for us. And I'm like you, I actually liked the Wiley pick as well. Mainly because that's a guy Bieniemy knows like the back of his hand coming out of Kansas City. He can play multiple positions. I don't want to use the PF phrase that gets thrown around, but he is versatile. And I think it's gonna help us in two ways. I think he's gonna be the best right tackle we've had in a while. He's a big guy. I mean, he's 6'6", 311. He's not going to get pushed around. And I think Cosme has kind of struggle might be the too strong of a word, but I just never felt like he really lived up to his draft position, at least so far. And so moving him inside, which I think is what they're going to do, moving him to right guard, I think that's going to help us at two spots and not just one. Because I think he'll be a lot more comfortable on the inside than he has been at tackle. But I really like it. He's only 28. That's the other thing I like. I love it when we're signing guys, because there was a long time there where we only signed guys on the wrong side of 30. Very rarely we signed anyone, that might have a couple of contracts in them. And especially on the O-line, those guys can play for a long time. I like the Wiley move. And I just wanted to mention one thing about Brissett. His interception percentage is like half of what Heineke's was, literally half. He doesn't throw a lot of picks. He's pretty smart. He's got some leadership skills. So I still think Sam Howell is I think Sam Howell's the presumed starter. And as long as the two of them are, competitive all through training camp and preseason, I think Howell's going to get the nod. And I hope Howell plays all 19 games of the 2023 season. That's that's being optimistic. But anyway, he was a third round pick. People forget that. And guess who picked Brissett in the draft? New England.
Yeah.
So they did trade him a year later for a receiver, but I think that was more about what they
they kind of had a quarterback that was pretty set
Right.
as the starter. So they were able to flip.
He's a local boy down here. I'm sorry, real quick. He's a local boy from down here. Played high school football in Palm Beach County, and was committed to the Miami Hurricanes before making a last-minute change to play for the Gators. So I've been hearing his name for a long time.
I'll double down on Wiley. I'm intrigued about Wiley and Gates. So we've added two people to the offensive line that weren't in the room last year, and we've re-signed Larson. Larson isn't exactly a groundbreaking move, but the sneaky thing is that the team was like 4-0 when he was a starter. Now that doesn't really translate to wins and losses. But what it does mean is that at a minimum, he's competent enough not to be a liability. So, for what he is, he's a good depth guy. He can play center or guard. So that's good. One other sneaky move that nobody's talking about is that we actually re-signed F.A. Obata, which I was actually surprised that isn't getting a little bit more run, because adding a guy like F.A. Obata after you've signed Deron Payne and you drafted Phil Mathis, he can play interior or inside or outside, but you got Smith Williams on the roster also, and you've got Ridgeway. So that just tells me the Obata signing is for depth at end. So now that even pushes a further spotlight. What are you going to do at end? What does that mean for Young or Sweat? I have to imagine one of the two of them is probably gone. One of the two of them is not wearing our color jersey by next season. So
Obata's one of those international program kids, right? And he came in with Reyes or whatever. And so that's impressive, man, to come in. They're going to give you, they're kind of obligated to give you a season or whatever as part of that program.
Yeah, but he had 4 sacks. He lined up at both end spots and with his hand as an interior lineman. So, I mean, he's a good flexible piece, and you can kind of move him around. But the whole point in all of this is what I think that they've done is something that they've done each of the last 2 years, and that's made it so that we enter the draft that any position is upgradable, but none of them are glaring holes. I think if the board hit wrong and we didn't draft a single lineman, we would all be disappointed, but I don't think we would enter the season terrified of what we're going to do when you're talking about having Leno, potentially Gates, Rouillet, Cosme, and Wiley, or any interchangeable mix of the guys we have. We're not going to enter the season thinking this is a disaster, but if we were to draft a left tackle in the first round, we would all applaud it and say there's definitely room for improvement. Same thing as the guard in the second, in the, in day 3, if we get a decent interior lineman, and that means that Rouillet is expendable. You kick Gates out to left guard, and now you've replaced literally 4 of your 5 starters on your O line in one offseason. So
I think Rouillet might get released. I really do, because you're looking at the last 2 seasons, he's barely played. I mean, he did a great job when he's in there, but
right.
And
but
when,
he's so
especially when they
limited.
re-signed Tyler Larson, I thought, man, that might be it for Rouillet.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, I don't know when they're going to do it. I actually kind of presume they would have already done it, but it could come in. They might wait until after the draft, which is going to kind of suck for him, but it is kind of one of those deals. So, nothing real flary, nothing real makes you jump up and down. Just a bunch of moves that kind of make sense. If that makes, I like the Dantzler move. That's kind of savvy. Grab a guy off of waivers that was a 3rd round pick like 2 years ago.
He's just got all those nagging little injuries he's had, which is, I mean, I was looking at him earlier, Derek, and I mean, he started the entire rookie season for the Vikings, and I think he played pretty well. I mean, he's got like 125 solo tackles, some interceptions, some fumble recoveries. He's just been like 2021 and 2022, he barely played. And it was mostly injury issues.
Well, that's
he also
what I mean.
He also had some kind of an issue with the coach, the head coach.
It's a savvy move because it's not a position of need. He's just a position of talent that comes available that you weren't expecting and you're not dependent on.
Right.
You bring him in, he's a rotational guy. If his injury bug bites again, he's still on his rookie contract, and you aren't dependent on him. He's not going to make or break your defense. So, that's all I made about being kind of a cool move.
Cody Barton's kind of the same kind of thing. They signed him to like a 1-year prove it deal. He's another 3rd round pick. Seattle drafted him. He's the thing I like about him. You get kind of mixed feedback when you talk to the Seattle fans, or at least that's what I saw on social media. But he's a converted safety, so he's still like learning the middle linebacker position. I was upset. I won't say upset. I didn't like the Cole Holcomb.
Yeah, that stung.
Thing, because it's not that I think he's the end all be all, but he does play his ass off. And when you don't have I don't think Cody Barton, I heard people making the argument today that Cody Barton is an upgrade over Cole Holcomb. Oh, hell no, he is not. That's insane. He might be, but
we don't know that yet. There's no way to know that yet.
And I'm just not a big fan of letting kind of core guys go, whether they're top tier guys or not, when you don't have a replacement already in your sights. Maybe they do, but we talked last season about what the hell are they doing at linebacker? And then now we're the only guys. We got Jamin Davis and nobody really.
And David Mayo. We signed David Mayo and Khaleke Hudson this offseason.
Khaleke Hudson played as good against the Cowboys as Sam Howell did. Maybe they see something there. I don't know. Did anybody see numbers yet on Holcomb's deal with the Steelers?
3-year deal. That's all I heard.
Yeah, because Keim said that they really wanted him back, but apparently they didn't want him back at whatever money Pittsburgh was going to go. And I don't know yet what Pittsburgh gave.
I think sometimes you have to overpay guys, because if you don't have an a viable alternative plan, like what you don't want to do is take a weak position group and make it weaker going into the next season. And we did that last year with the O-line. I mean, you cannot argue that O-line got worse. We took a strength and we made it a liability. And I kind of feel like we might be doing the same thing at linebacker, but of course, some people argue we don't need linebackers. I don't really get that argument, but
I think the point they make is we usually run a 4-2-5 where we've got 5 DBs, and a lot of the times that those 2 linebackers aren't even necessarily set for specific assignments as much as their zone coverage. So it's not necessarily you're not really dependent on your linebacker being able to take over a game, I guess is the point they're making. I'm not saying I agree. I'm just saying that's what the argument is.
Gotcha.
Ben Standig highlighted a stat today that in 2022, Washington played a 4-3 set on 6 plays for the whole season. So yeah, they played 5-2 or whatever they're doing. But I would think if we're playing 2, it would be Davis and Holcomb. So I'm guessing now if we play 2, it's going to be Davis and Barton. I do like that Barton plays the middle because I really think Jamin should be able
outside
to roam around a little bit more. Yeah.
Well, I saw a video clip of Barton going step for step with who was it? A slot receiver, and now I can't remember who it was, but
I think with the Rams.
yeah, it might have
Against the
been.
Rams.
Yeah, and he was just step for step, so it was that safety speed. You could see it.
He ran
And it wasn't
4.6
just
in a
step-
combine.
It wasn't just step for step for 5 or 10 yards. It was 35 to 40 yards downfield. He was step for step with a slot corner or with a slot receiver. So
I like that we re-signed Danny Johnson. Because Danny Johnson is a guy that doesn't get a lot of hype. But what I see is when he's in the game, he seems like he's always around the ball making plays. When we've used him on return duties, he's done pretty well. And I think that's one of the things I would like to see them get him more involved in special teams because I think he's a good player, but I think he's kind of an underrated guy at corner.
yeah.
So where do you guys think, like, I know we're only like 2 days into the free agency process or so, where do we have to go next? Like, do you think that they are done? Do you think that we're going to stand pat, or do you think that there are more moves to come? And if so, what might be an area of priority that we need to emphasize?
Well, I think
I
they
mean,
checked a lot of the boxes that we came into thinking that we needed to check. Needed a backup quarterback. We needed to address the O-line.
we're not done at O-line. I can't imagine we're done at O-line.
I think free agent wise, I think we might be. I think the next move is going to be the draft.
Do you guys think that, because I'm personally of the mindset that we need to solidify the tight end position. I'm wondering if we're going to make a play there. You know, it's very well documented that a lot of times your tight end is a young quarterback or any quarterback's best friend. You know, if you look, for example, at what Jacksonville did a year ago, and you look at you look at the development of Trevor Lawrence, Evan Ingram was a free agency acquisition that played a pretty significant role. He was targeted almost 100 times. He had over 70 receptions. Do you think that there is some sort of move or some sort of play to upgrade that tight end position to help Sam Howell in his development this season? Because to me, priority number one has to be to set Howell up for success. And I'm wondering if, you know, if there's going to be something at tight end.
Tell me what Eric Bieniemy thinks of Logan Thomas for starters, because that's what I have no idea what he thinks. What I think is he had one great season, and ever since then he's had injury. He can't stay on the field, and when he is on the field, he looks not ready to be on the field. Sometimes mentally, sometimes physically. So I just don't know if we're ever gonna see the guy that had that one really great season. And I have no idea what Bieniemy thinks about that, because I sometimes I think if you put a poll up on Twitter, the fans will, I would say by probably like a 3-1 margin, would say trade him or release him, and find someone better. You know, you got the Giants; they just grabbed Darren Waller, right? And then I know there's good tight ends out there. I think is it Gesicki, and there's
Gesicki's the name I keep coming back to. The
I
longer
just
he's
don't know
out
what
there,
they
the
think of
more
our tight end group. I think they like some of the. I think still think Cole Turner might turn into something. They obviously like Rogers. I like Rogers.
I do too.
So I don't know. It's hard to answer that question. I feel like we need to upgrade that group, but I just don't know if the coaches think we need to upgrade that group. What do you think?
I'm personally of the mindset that, to me, it should be, a fairly important priority given where we are in terms of our quarterback position. It's not like we have an established starter back there, right? And to me, it's all about helping Howell be set up for success, and I see a tight end as being instrumental in that process. So I don't know. I was hoping it would be something that we can address in the offseason. With a proven guy. I'm not necessarily going the draft route for a tight end. With basically a rookie with Howell in there, I don't know if that serves him well. I think you need that veteran presence, and I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they've just deemed that what's out there in free agency is not worth their while. So
I have heard that it's a strong tight end group in the draft. I have heard that, but you're right. You don't know for sure what you're going to get.
I guess the question then is, Michael Mayer, let's say the top left tackle's off the board and Michael Mayer is on the board at 16, 6'4", 265. A lot of people say that guy could be Kittle. You know what I'm like? He's got that dynamic playmaking ability, and he's big and strong enough that he can block. Would you consider taking that guy at 16? Like, honestly,
I probably would because it's the only weak link of the skill position on offense. If we can solidify the O-line and we add like a really talented tight end, oh my gosh, we could really have something on offense. Of course, I said that last year, and it didn't work out.
I would take the second best left tackle candidate if the first one was gone at 16. I'm just not a fan of taking a tight end that high in the draft.
The problem is they don't touch the ball enough. They don't touch the ball enough to warrant, unless they're a game-changing kind of a player. They don't get enough touches in a game I think that's why they traditionally haven't gone really early.
We need a stud offensive lineman.
Yeah,
I tend to agree. I was
especially especially a tackle if he's available, someone that can grow and be here. Because especially a left tackle, all of the talent in the NFC East that's a threat to the quarterback, it's all coming off the defense's right side. And I'm sorry, I love Charles Leno, but he was a turnstile against any athletic guy coming in his face last year from any of those three teams.
They might have the guy that we're calling that the fan base has inked in as the top left tackle. It might be our talent scouts third guy. And just like we saw with Jahan Dotson, we literally were totally silent for like a minute after that was made, because we'd spent so much time on other, all the guys that were being hyped up that we didn't even know anything about Jahan Dotson, and it turned out to be just an awesome, brilliant pick. So it could be the same kind of thing on the O lineman.
And that's the other thing with Wiley. Wiley, they said, is versatile enough to kick inside. So if you draft a tackle, Leno, if you do want to keep Leno and he's willing to move to the right side or any variation thereof, I don't think you're going to put Leno on the bench paying him what we're paying him. He's either going to play on the right side or you're going to release him or trade him or something. But does that even further solidify the line where now you've got Cosme at right guard, Wiley at left guard, you've got Gates and Roulier battling it out for starting center, rookie left tackle, and Leno at right tackle? I mean, again, there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of possibilities to get the best five guys on the field.
Our offensive line definitely, if I were to identify what concerns me most right now, in regards to our offensive line, one of the things towards the top of my list would be the fact that we don't appear to have anybody that could potentially be a long-term fixture along that line. Maybe Cosby, maybe Chris Paul, but outside of those two guys, it seems like we have a collection of players along the offensive front that are short-term fixes. So absolutely the draft. Previously I said I hope that we come out of the draft with 3 linemen. That might be a little bit unrealistic, but even given some of the moves we've made along the offensive line over the last few days, I still hope that we have 2 linemen brought in through the draft. We definitely need to establish some, long-term solidification along that line. So the more young pieces we can bring in, the better, obviously.
Absolutely.
No argument here.
I mean, if we had a draft that consisted of nothing other than O-linemen, linebackers, and maybe a corner or a kicker late, I would be thrilled with that. I mean, what other needs do we really? I know we're not talking about the draft really tonight, but those to me are the glaring needs.
As long as somebody we take can return kicks. I would love to see us take, and yeah, I know we'll dig more in the draft, but I would love to see us take a guy like Jaden Reed out of Michigan State. I think it's Michigan State. There's a couple guys there, that wide receivers that are coming into the draft that were return specialists in college. And I just think it's been a forgotten aspect of our game that field position is so essential. An extra 5 to 10 yard on average per kick return is huge, and it's not Troy Apke or not Dax Milne back there simply because he can catch the ball.
Right. The bar needs to be raised from just don't fumble it to let's
make a play.
I mean, it really does feel that way, right? Like we're just happy if you don't totally fuck it up and fumble it.
That's the truth.
Well, Steven Sims did that to us.
Yeah, but he also had 2 returns for touchdowns. Like,
that's okay. I'll take no touchdowns for no fumbles. I'll trade you that.
Yeah. But I just think it's a forgotten aspect of the team. When we have so much other emphasis on special teams, we're paying guys like Jeremy Reeves, you know what I mean? We're signing guys because of their special teams abilities. But then it's like, well, the guy that touches the ball, we're just gonna try to find somebody that's not a liability instead of somebody that's a weapon.
So I saw a little quick poll on Twitter before I came on. It basically was saying, so far in free agency, do you feel like we've treaded water? Have we gotten slightly better or slightly worse as in terms of the roster? What would you guys say?
I think Derek hit the nail on the head.
Considering the releases as well.
I think Derek hit the nail on the head. It's not so much that we've really raised the ceiling, but I think we've certainly raised the floor. So
yeah.
So
I guess by that definition, we're slightly better.
Slightly better.
That's what I think.
And the draft can take that slightly better to being, a lot better.
So the next shoe to drop in free agency is we'll start to see guys that still have quite a bit of upside or quite a bit of they can still play. Maybe they're on the wrong side of 30, but they can still play, and maybe they're too expensive for the teams they're currently on. So that next wave of releases is we're going to start seeing. I think that's probably where if we're not done in free agency, that might be where we pick somebody up.
We'll probably make a couple moves ourselves. Because I like to what we were just talking about. I can see Rouillet and Leno both being cap casualties, depending on how they feel the draft board's going to go. Then on top of that, Norwell is a third one that he's still under contract, right? I think this was that their savings there. So you want to truly turn over your offensive line, and you can say, I think we can save double digits, over $10 million with those 3 releases. So it could change a lot real quick, depending on how the next couple of days goes.
I would be surprised if they let Norwell go, only because sometimes I feel like Ron, when they've made decisions, they're, unless it's like horrifically bad, like with Wentz,
They stick with it.
where the fan base is screaming bloody murder, they're very stubborn about making changes. That's just kind of my sense of it. So I don't know. Again, it's hard to know sometimes, like, do they think the fans are just ignorant and Norwell's actually quite good and we just don't know what we're looking at? Or do they see the same things that we think we see?
Well, I think they do pay a lot of attention to social media, more than they should, honestly. But it's not like people are out there jumping up and down about Norwell. I bet you if you polled the Washington fans, half of them don't even know what position he plays. But everybody knows that they wanted Wentz gone. Everybody knows the quarterback and the backup quarterback. So I just think it's a different level of volume. But they have to see it. But I think, honestly, I think part of the struggles of our line, and I will continue to say this, was they were being put in positions that were unfair to them, and I think that's part of the reason why Scott Turner's not the offensive coordinator anymore. I mean, I think we were watching the same guys beat us over and over again with no adjustments to account for it, So, yeah, Leno was a turnstile, but how many times were we asking him to guard Kayvon Thibodeau one-on-one after it was abundantly obvious that he couldn't handle it? Same thing for Norwell on the interior when he's going up against now my brain's skipping me on the interior lineman for the Eagles that was just punishing us. So you wonder if the schematics of it changed our opinion of the offensive linemen that we have and their ability to perform. Obviously, they saw enough to bring in two guys in the offseason that are not starting left tackles, so their interior and right tackle help. So they do see some of what we've seen. It's just the chicken or the egg for me. Which one's worse, the guy playing or the guy setting them up to make plays?
I'm surprised that there's been zero restructures, whether it be Cam Curl, or they're going to try and do something with Montez or Curtis Samuel or those kind of guys. So if you talk restructures, who's the priority for you guys?
I think Allen, I could see them restructuring John Allen's contract just because based on what he's done. We talked about this earlier, like you wait a year, you were the highest paid, second highest paid, defensive player in the league. And then, 6 months later, you're number 28 or whatever, because
you're not even the highest paid on your own team.
Right. When you're clearly the best player on your team. So I could see them like restructuring him to free up space, but also to give him more money to make sure he's happy in light of what they're paying Deron Payne. Not that he's unhappy about that. I have no idea, but I'm sure it doesn't escape his notice, like that when the numbers are flying around on Twitter, I'm sure he sees that. So
I should have included extensions as well. So not just restructures, but they could have restructured deals to do extensions, is I guess what I was trying to say.
I'm looking at Spotrac, and our top contracts are Deron Payne, John Allen, McLaurin, Chase Roullier, Kendall Fuller, Charles Leno, Chase Young, Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas. So of those names I said, the five guys that I put my hands up for, I could see us restructuring any one of those guys if we have any intention on keeping them beyond this year. Because I do think,
or flat out releasing them.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. Is either you release them or you talk a restructure with an extension. I could see us doing that with a guy like Kendall Fuller. I think you move on from Roullier. I could see us doing that with Logan Thomas because they do appreciate him and his ability to be a leader. But he's 31 years old and he's making a lot of money for not being able to complete the season, and he's coming off a major injury. You know what I mean? We saw a serious step back. He's almost a $9 million cap hit next year in 2023. I mean, so restructure some of that into a signing bonus and free up some money. There have been restructures all over the league. Mahomes, Deshaun Watson,
Dak,
Josh Allen,
Dak
I was trying
Prescott.
to, Dak Prescott. There's been a mess of restructures, especially at the quarterback position, which generally is your highest contract on your team, to free up opportunities to be able to pay other people and bring in talent. So, but then again, the MO of this front office, it doesn't seem like that's something that they do. I can't tell you the last time, at least not here. I can't tell you if he's ever even done that.
Number that surprised me: Cody Barton signed for $3.5 million. He's the 16th highest cap hit on the team at $3.5 million.
Hey, I just saw on Twitter, big news. Aaron Rodgers is telling the Jets he's adding to his wish list. They have to get Shailene Woodley to agree to get back together with him now. I don't know if this is real or not, but
That's
Anyway.
pretty good.
I watched his Pat McAfee show thing today. Me and 493,000 other people, mostly Jet fans. He's a piece of work.
Yeah, I texted my buddy who's a diehard. We commiserate because he's a Jets fan, like diehard, like we are about the Redskins. I said, Jesus, you guys really want that drama queen on your roster? I'd rather lose than have his constant drama. And he said, I'm definitely not sold on Rodgers' skills and drama, but that's how starved Jets are for a championship. No Super Bowl appearances in 54 years tends to make you a bit desperate.
Amen.
I don't know what to take of that whole situation. They're going to talk about restructuring. He's a $60 million cap hit this year. So if they're going to pick him up, they're going to have to do something with that. So I don't know any team that can stomach that.
Well, the Packers, man, they have him over a barrel now because they totally can hold him hostage. They don't have to worry about the money they owe him until like September or something crazy. So they
Packers said they want 2 firsts today.
Yeah, oh my God.
They want 2 firsts in compensation.
The Jets, meanwhile, the Jets watch every other team grab. I mean, hell, they can't even get Jacoby Brissett now. I don't know. Aren't you glad it's not us, though?
For a change? That's an interesting point, and that's one thing that I do want to talk about. To your point in the thread, another thread you made about complaining about how weak the offense is going to be. I am so glad we're going into a season right now where it's not a complete disarray and turmoil at the quarterback position, even if it's not expected to be a good season with our quarterback. At least we're not talking about an overpaid quarterback we gave up a bunch of stuff for. We're not talking about having, and obviously you feel for what he went through, but having a $20 million cap hit from Alex Smith when he's literally on one leg. We're not talking about rest in peace, but a drama king in Dwayne Haskins that doesn't agree with your head coach.
No water slide injuries that we're aware of coming.
Right. It's just we're going into the season now where we have a starting quarterback that we all believe is going to be the starter week 1. We have a viable backup that people are probably going to clamor for way too early, but that's what our fan base does. And that's it. And they're going to either perform or they're not. And that's the end of it. We're not going to look back and say this was a terrible move or that we've hindered the franchise for the next 5 years or anything.
And on top of that, Derek, you can go into the season with the mindset and approach of we have absolutely nothing to lose because this starting quarterback that we're talking about in Sam Howell is a 5th-round draft pick. At the end of the day, if he falters, you lost a 5th-round pick and you can start over next year.
You move on with no.
Well, somebody can. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
somebody's got something to lose. Yeah.
Right. But I don't know about you guys, and I know I am that fan, even though I'm negative as hell on Twitter. The truth is I'm a big time homer. I mean, I have to have the homerism beat beat right out of me, and I have had it beaten out of me the last few seasons, but I really think Sam Howell can play. I really do. I know it's a small sample size and all that, but what I see is the guy's got a hell of an arm. He makes quick decisions. He's elusive as hell. He can run, and he just has good instincts. And I'm telling you, I really think we're going to be shocked at how much better the offense is. I know I could be horribly wrong, but I haven't felt this confident about like a quarterback since, well, I don't know when. It's been a while. I
Well,
really
and
like.
the other thing is, and I do too, but the expectation isn't like he's going to be an all pro. We
He
just
doesn't have
think
to
he's
be an
going to be a
all-pro.
viable and a competent quarterback, right? Like that's it. And I look at it, people are like, why are you so excited about Hal? And it's not that I'm excited about Hal. I think he's going to be good enough. We can't be any worse. We literally had guys that weren't even, we had 2 starting quarterbacks and neither one were in the top 32 of any statistical category that mattered.
And
Like, do
we've
the
got an
math on that.
OC who supposedly had something to do with the best offense in NFL history. I mean, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And we have great skill position players. I don't really understand I see a lot of stuff about how can you possibly start Sam Howell? Like, yeah, like what an anomaly to start a rookie quarterback in the NFL, right? Who does that?
Well, and the other thing is, sorry, not to keep bombarding this. We seem to be mired in mediocrity. This team has never done a true reset where we strip the important pieces down to the foundation and build the team. Now we have one of the better, deeper rosters that we've had in a long time. But instead of trying to patchwork a quarterback together, now we're actually going to take a shot on a guy. If it doesn't work, we'll be in position to draft the future. And if it does work, we've got the future. You know what I mean?
Yeah. My mantra for a while now has been, what in God's name are we afraid of? Can the offense get any worse than it's been in terms of overall scoring and production? Could it really get worse? I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, unless they expand the league, and then I guess we could be 35th or whatever. But I'm feeling pretty good about it. We'll see what happens.
Well, is that all you guys got? What do you got, Chris? What do you got, Paul?
I don't know if we talked. I don't know if we talked about this at all. It may have been brought up at one point, but I don't think we really expanded on it or elaborated on it. It appears to me as though this team wants to build its defensive identity around the interior. We obviously saw that with the extension of Deron Payne. To me, it seemed as though we got by fairly well a year ago without Chase Young. At end, we had guys like Sweat, we had guys like Obata, Smith Williams, etc. Toohill. We seem to be a pretty efficient unit. A year ago, at this time, we were talking about, is it the time to trade Deron Payne? Do you think that the team is investing any time and energy into exploring the possibility of trading Chase Young or Montez Sweat right now? Because there's no possible way that we are keeping all 4 of those first-round picks on this line at this point with the extension of Deron Payne. They've made it abundantly clear that they want their identity to be centered around the defensive tackles. So which of those 2 guys is the odd man out at this point?
I'm not sold on Chase Young. I really have never been sold on Chase Young, but I don't talk about it a lot because I take a beating whenever I say anything like that. Aside from the injury, the start of his second season, when he just looked like he was out there cowboying it, and who knew? I just didn't get the feeling that he even knew what he was supposed to be doing. That kind of soured me on him a little bit. And then I just don't know, coming off the injury, he looked okay. I mean, I guess he looked limited a little bit when he did come back at the end of the year last year. So I don't know what you would get for him on the open market right now. I don't know whether they would go ahead and give him the 5th year, give him the 5th year and then try to trade him assuming he has a good season this year. But I agree with you. I'm not sure we need, a quarter of our salary committed to the D line. And I'm not sure this is the part that gets me beat on social media, but I don't know that we need him. Even if he's playing like the early Chase Young that we saw, I don't know that we really need him, and that we have other needs that we might be able to fill if we were able to trade him. But that's just I know that's not a popular idea.
I'm personally right there with you. I think we get enough interior pressure from guys like Allen and Payne, and I think that Montez Sweat is pretty efficient off the end. I would absolutely be exploring the possibility of parting ways with Chase Young at this point. Looking back, it doesn't seem as though it was the right pick for this team. But again, that being said, I don't think anybody was arguing his selection at the time. But I think now would be as good a time as any to be floating him out there.
I prefer Montez over Chase. But I don't think that Chase right now is going to have the value that we're going to hope for in return. So if there's a way to set up with, give him the 5th-year extension and let him play 10, 12 games. If he sets the world on fire, hey, we benefit. If he doesn't set the world on fire, he's still got to have better trade value than he does being an unknown coming off that injury coming into the season. So I wouldn't do it now. But, if you put me in a corner, I'd take Montez. But can the guys that picked him number 2 overall live with kind of admitting it was a failure? I don't know the answer to that either.
No argument for me. If you can move him, I say move him. At this point, I don't think you're going to invest in him. So why hold on to him? Especially if you're not going to pick up the 5th-year option.
Which, by the way, this is one of the things that I wish Rivera would just learn to keep his mouth shut. Why would you openly talk about that? Like the whole thing about motivating him, you can do that in private. You don't need to do it.
Yeah, you can look at him and say, dude, get your shit together or we're not going to offer the 5th year.
I don't understand sometimes. What are you thinking? Like, I don't know. I don't get it.
I'm with you.
I'll put that up there with them saying they can't say anything nice about Cam Curl because his agent would use it against him. Well, come on, just don't say anything. I would like to point out, before we finish, I would like to point out that we are 63 minutes into this recording. And I'm going to break it by being the first one to mention the name Dan Snyder. And now I'm done. But isn't that refreshing?
Well, on that note, I guess hopefully we can
hopefully that's the next emergency pod, right?
Yeah, that's right. Because be ready for that.
I don't know that we've ever had an emergency pod, but that would definitely be one I think we could all.
Yeah.
Mark even said our buddy Mark is on vacation right now, and he's like, if the evil one sells the team, let me know, and I will dial in from wherever the hell he is right now.
Yeah, if whenever that does happen, that podcast is going to be going down that day. I don't care if all four of us are holding phones up, looking at them when we're walking down the street. We're going to get together and celebrate that one together. But I don't think we're done. It was an interesting couple of days. I like some of the moves, some of them that I think they were all necessary. There aren't any that you really get upset about. It stung to see Holcomb leave. And one other thing that we didn't really touch on is farewell to the legend of Taylor Heineke. I think we can all say we truly appreciated what we got here with him. The last 2 years would have been impossible without him, but I'm not heartbroken that his on-field production is gone. I can appreciate him as a player and still believe it was time to move on and that we can do better. I think both of those things can be true.
Amen.
I think we play the Falcons, if I'm not mistaken, at some point this season.
Yep.
For as much as we all love Taylor Heineke, we need to make sure that he is not given the opportunity to
To beat
buy
us.
Jordans in burgundy and gold. That's
That's right.
unacceptable.
That was absolutely. Oh, all right, boys. Well, I guess we'll keep an ear on the ground and see what's coming, and if anything else big comes up, we'll get back together.
All right, guys.
Good night.
Right.
Thank